9th straight. This avenue has been silent for about an hour and a half. Traffic has been cleared from Constitution since 3 o'clock. Many people with cameras here today. A young couple appearing to be about 20, 25 years old. When asked why they came today, said this was the first time they were in Washington, and they can't remember General Eisenhower from their childhood. And they came to see the history that is passing now, the archives of the United States.
You know, it's difficult for us, John, of my generation, which was one removed at least from the generals, but as a young reporter, I covered him in his earliest stages of his career in Europe, to appreciate that there are so many of voting age today who were born even after that European conflict, and who, even of his presidency, because they were so small, remember virtually nothing. I rode down to Washington on a plane yesterday with one of the young leaders, the young militant leaders, one who is under indictment today. He happened to be on the same plane. I sat next to him. He speaks very well. He's a very bright fellow. But he really knew very little of Dwight David Eisenhower.
Well, you know, Walter, it occurs to me that the events since this man was president have been so turbulent, so monumental, too, that they tend to wipe some of those memories that were very fresh only 8 years ago.
We see, and I think some of the indicated planning in the Nixon administration, an attempt by President Nixon to accomplish something that Eisenhower accomplished, and which he claimed was his greatest accomplishment as president. That was to bring an era of tranquility and calm to a people who at that point had been through the Great Depression of the 30s, the buildup of Hitler in Europe, the problems in the Far East with the expanding Japanese empire there, conflicts in China, then into World War II and the post-adjustment period. He brought the nation a period of calm and tranquility. Whatever else his administration is remembered for, it will be remembered for that, and he was proud of that. I think that we see some of that in the man who owes so much to General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, President Nixon.
As the president visited the general many times since he became president, as often as he could, at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, he said something during the campaign which has kind of stuck with me. He said that in all of his time in the White House with President Eisenhower, he never did call him Ike. And he may be one of the few people in the United States who never did that. He always called him Mr. President or General or Mr. Eisenhower.
Well, you know, yesterday with some friends of the generals, General Bradley and General Grunther, Bob Anderson, Kevin McCann, Bob Hope, we talked about that very thing, about how, in particular with several of these men, Generals Bradley and Grunther particularly, who had been through so much in the military area with him, and who, except only in public, called him Ike. How could they adjust to calling him Mr. President in the White House? They said they found it not at all difficult. the office and the man, of course, commanding that respect, they felt. But General Bradley did say he slipped just once and called him Ike, and apologized immediately thereafter, and the general simply grinned. And immediately after he left the White House, John, he told all of them, all of his old friends, he said, you know, as of today, I'm Ike again.
Quezon is now at about 6th Street, approaching the intersection with Pennsylvania, which it crosses, of course, to go up that hill where it will turn south into the Capitol Plaza. The sun is following General Eisenhower down Constitution Avenue, Walter. As we look toward the east, it's dark, and as we look toward the west, this mantle of clouds is being pulled back. We're almost in the sun again, here at 7th and Constitution.
Oh, I see.
Quezon having passed, many of the people are beginning to leave the curbside where they have waited for an hour and a half. And it was cold and rain and sleet and sometimes a dust of snow. There are ropes in the gutters along this street that were to have been lifted, and very orderly crowd here. It wasn't necessary to hold them back. On the street, security was not evident at all. Occasionally you can see a uniformed patrolman on the corner of one of these high government buildings. But I suppose rather than mourning, it was the witnessing of a great event here. An affectionate kind of an afternoon. In fact, there was even a gentleman selling ice cream and cold soft drinks in this freezing weather, finding a few customers. The military units that stand at parade rest along Constitution Avenue come to attention when former Commander-in-Chief passes that caisson, drawn by 3 teams of horses. Earlier today, along this same route, artillery pieces drawn toward the Capitol for the 21-gun salute.
John, we can see the last of the bands and the first of the automobiles carrying the cortege up the 2-block hill to the entrance into the Capitol grounds. Detachment there. Navy, Coast Guard behind them. comrades in arms who have come here from corners of the world to pay last tribute to General Eisenhower's Moscow delegation, headed by Marshal Vasily Chuikov, who is the World War II commander at Stalingrad, is now the Soviet Civil Defense Chief. Probably the general who, among the Soviets, General Eisenhower got along best, General Georgy Zhukov, who they met at the Elbe, did not come. No explanation from the Soviets, but they have sent a very distinguished delegation. We pause now for station identification. The procession is arriving at the Capitol. The marching units passing by the turn into the Capitol, the motorcade will, and there waiting is Roger Mudd.
The United States Army Band has just drawn into place here on the east steps of the U.S. Capitol. The big bass drums and snare drums tightly rolled in black crepe. The sun is just breaking through. After trying for some time, the sun has finally come out here. One of the CBS cameramen who traveled with General Eisenhower in 1952 said, "Do we always call that Ike weather?" He would go into places where the rain would be torrential and suddenly the sun would break through.
Sort of seemed, Roger, like the weather trying to Mother Nature make up for the trick she played on him on the landing in Normandy.
Well, that sun is the most welcome thing that this crowd up here today has had. 10 minutes ago, the wind was cutting through every piece of clothing you could gather together. It was very cold and very bitter without any hope at all of relief, but now the sun has at least taken that raw edge off the air. The sharp break in the concrete, the pavement there, indicates the beginning of the rise up to Capitol Hill. Just that 2 to 3 block pump up Jenkins Hill to the top of the Capitol Plaza. In place here now is the U.S. Army Band and the company of soldiers, Marines, sailors, Air Force men, and Coast Guard. They're dressing right and trimming their lines. Already in place on the Capitol steps is the joint military cordon. 61 men from the 5 services. They came in about 20 minutes ago and have been standing at rifle parade rest on the steps of the Capitol. "30 minutes ago or 25 minutes ago, when we had the jet flyover, it provided this crowd, now numbering possibly 2,000, 2,500, a moment of anticipation, and all heads swung around as this fleet of jets came over. As the units of the cortege come into the plaza, they will take their positions and reform, and each will be in place before the actual caisson comes to a stop at the base of the steps. Around the perimeter of the Capitol building, police, a pair at each corner of the marble cornices, and even up on the high dome we saw a plainclothesman up above looking down. Now these units have taken their positions and are formed, and the company commander of each unit is reporting to the escort officer. These are the first cars of the funeral procession to arrive and are swinging in at the law library door on the east wall of the Capitol. The Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Senor Civila Sacasa of Nicaragua, and members of the reception committee, which will be here and will form in the rotunda. The crowd here is at least more animated than it was before, when its only concern was keeping warm, but now it has a little warmth in the air and also something to watch and occupy itself. We've got a few in the trees, but not so many. Most of them are just glad to have someone to stand behind to cut the wind down. When the main portion of the funeral procession arrives, the participants already will be in the rotunda, and when they have all gotten in their appropriate positions, then the United States Army Band, which is called Pershing's Own, will play 4 ruffles and flourishes and then hail to the chief, and at that point the saluting batteries will get off a 21-gun salute. The same formation and these same colorful uniforms, of course, we've seen up here now 4 times in the last 5 years. John Kennedy in 1963, and Douglas MacArthur and Herbert Hoover in 1964. And today, Dwight Eisenhower. There seems to be in the capital city almost a feeling of relief that one of the nation's leaders, after a period of so much violent death, and that finally one of its leaders has lived out his life to the fullest and enjoyed all the fruits of that life and has died peacefully. And that in itself does not depress this crowd. Mrs. Eisenhower and her son John have now entered the Capitol building. President de Gaulle of France expected to arrive in Washington about 6 o'clock this evening from Paris, is expected to come here to the Capitol after his arrival to pay his respects to the late General Eisenhower in the rotunda. We're told between 7 and 7:30 this evening. All day long, this east front plaza has been, of course, cleared of all cars except only military vehicles. Occasionally, you'll find a private car come suddenly through and wondered how the car got through the military guard, but inside will be a senator who has been permitted to come in. One member of the Congress left his car over near the Senate steps and took the keys with him, so 4 Capitol policemen had to get in and push it by hand to get it out of the way. They didn't get it very far either. It's still partially blocking the driveway. Members of the House and Senate, numbering altogether probably 100 or so, have assembled in their proper chamber, House and Senate. In the House side, the Speaker, Mr. McCormick, has permitted the wives to come in to be with their husbands, and then they'll move on into the rotunda. Telegrams went out from each branch of the legislature announcing the funeral arrangements. How many have come back, the congressional officials really don't know, because both House and Senate went out on a 3-day recess last week, and there isn't very much legislative business to bring them back, so they're only guessing now what the attendance will be.
Roger, how death disrupts men's normal routines. Dwight, de Gaulle was invited by President Nixon, of course, during the president's recent visit to Europe to pay him a return visit to Washington. This, of course, did not count as that, but they had not certainly anticipated at that moment that de Gaulle would be coming to Washington this soon. And John Gorton, the president of Australia, Prime Minister of Australia, had planned to come here later in the week for official visits with the president. Now, he is here earlier than expected, but the official part of his visit had been canceled, and he will come back at a later date.
The rotunda itself, of course, is an enormous hall through which millions of tourists pass each year, and normally serves the Capitol as a meeting place and where most of the guided tours of the Capitol begin, from the rotunda itself. From ceiling to floor, I think the measurement is a little over 180 feet. Its walls are lined with a series of panels of paintings of various phases of our history. Off to the western rim of the rotunda is the Congressional Prayer Room, and then to the north and south go the corridors leading into the House and Senate chamber.
Roger, you mentioned earlier that the rotunda is flower banked, and yet in the very first announcement of General Eisenhower's death by General Hughes at Walter Reed Hospital on Friday, there was a family request that flowers not be sent, and a list of General Eisenhower's favorite charities given instead.
Well, that's really very hard to enforce. People send flowers, whether the family asks that they not be sent at all. So something people just want to do, and they do. However, I didn't make myself clear because the flowers themselves are not in the rotunda. They're in a large hallway that leads off to the west from the rotunda. Arranged in no particular order, just in order of receipt. Each one is numbered, and as we mentioned earlier, Queen Elizabeth's is next to Queen Elizabeth's spray is next to an arrangement from the non-commissioned officers of San Antonio, Texas. I dare say, Walter, that while the only flowers that are supposed to be placed at the base of the casket are those from the President and those from the House and from the Senate, if a head of state feels so moved to take his flowers up, I doubt if the military district of Washington will intercede. That has happened in the past, where they've put down the rules that only the 3 designated arrangements go up, but when a king or a prince or a Shaw wants to move forward, he usually does.
I saw a note here in one of the wires, Roger, that one group of flowers there had been addressed simply to Ike Eisenhower, U.S. Capitol, and signed simply from soldiers who fought under him.
Well, they were from private citizens and from kings and from the chief municipal officer of a small town in France, and they were from former comrades in arms. These limousines, of course, are now moving into the East Front Plaza. There's the one carrying President Nixon, with the 2 Secret Service outriders holding on to those handles. As each one stops, the doors open and the chauffeurs and the escorts leap around to the proper side to open the doors for the occupants. The first car that was in here was in such a hurry to get off and get out of the way that when he let his clutch out, he squealed his tires, which was the noise you heard a minute ago. Well, that was my mistake. I thought that was the presidential car, but it's the vice presidential car. Vice President Agnew and his wife and his naval aide and 3 accompanying Secret Service men. Speaker McCormick is next in line. Each is accompanied by a military officer or escort. Behind the speaker is Chief Justice Earl Warren and Mr. Justice Brennan, Mr. Justice Whitaker. Mr. Justice Fortas in their gray cutaways and striped trousers. Mr. Justice Black, White, Marshall, Fortas. Four of those justices, of course, were appointed by President Eisenhower. Earl Warren leading the court, followed by Hugo Black and Marshall. Secretary of State Rogers now follows up the steps between this joint military cordon. And the Nixon cabinet now making its way up. Secretary George Romney, Defense Secretary Melvin Laird,
Roger, these steps to the Capitol, to the rotunda, are really almost only used, aren't they, in ceremonial occasions when the inaugural takes place on them and for occasions like this?
That's right. It's a good challenge for tourists, Walter, who like to use those steps just to say that they've done it, but men who work up here every day don't use them very often. These are diplomats arriving now. And as each stops and alights from his car, then he's quickly picked up by a security man or a military escort and sent on the proper way up to the rotunda. It's Lord Mountbatten with his aide and his British escorts. This procedure probably will take another 10 or 15 minutes before all the limousines have come into the plaza single file, and each has discharged its passenger, and they've gone up to the rotunda. All these guests must be in the rotunda before the president, the Eisenhower family and the president actually arrive here. Postmaster General Winton Blunt by himself. Now the cars are beginning to come in double file, hopefully to speed up the procedure. Governor Claude Kirk of Florida is arriving. Spot the governors because normally it's a state trooper who drives their limousine. Claude Kirk already has gone in there as Governor McKeldin, former Governor McKeldin. He's the official representative from the state of Maryland, and of course the man who nominated General Eisenhower in 1952. Lester Maddox of Georgia. Followed by a Georgia State Trooper.
Roger, do you have any idea where President Nixon and the Eisenhower family are waiting before they go in? Their cars must have been far ahead of this in the procession.
I didn't hear you, Walter. I'm sorry.
I was wondering where the President Nixon and the Eisenhower family are waiting during this period. Have they gone in another door, do you suppose?
I have not seen them arrive here, as a matter of fact. The president has not come here. Whether
the cars must have been earlier than this in the procession. That's what I was wondering. Maybe they're back there with the caisson.
That was my impression, that they are behind the caisson, and that whether they're just idling in the Constitution Avenue down below, it would be the only place I'd know where they'd be, because they have not come here. I think to avoid having them have to stand in the rotunda while all the guests arrive, they're just being held in their cars down at the base of the hill.
Is that Roger, the fire department going to an alarm somewhere in Capitol Hill area?
I didn't hear, Walter.
Is that the fire department we hear in the background going to an alarm somewhere
It
in
must
the
be.
Capitol area?
It does not sound as if it's getting any closer here. That's over in the northeast section of Washington, behind Union Station. There are no more cars in sight now. They've all come through here and discharged their passengers, so presumably, well, it is getting closer now. It's a fire engine or an ambulance of some sort.
I don't see any cars there by the caisson either. the official party may have entered one of the ground floor entrances of the Capitol. Already be in the building.
Well, I wouldn't know where they'd get through, where an automobile could get through without having been seen here.
You can see the north side there, can you? The north entrance? I mean, the north entrance on the plaza there.
Yes, I can. Now we've got a signal that caisson is and the color guard is coming into the plaza.
We do see the cars there now, Roger. They are there.
You do?
Yes, we got
right.
a brief glimpse there. I think that was the cars of the president and the Eisenhower family, the pallbearers and so forth. Yes, they're moving out along with the caisson.
Here's the caisson making the turn into the East Plaza. Preceding the caisson, of course, are the colors, and then ahead of the colors was the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Through the bare trees of the east front, greensward, the caisson, which is covered with a light, transparent plastic wrapping over the flag, is coming into the center line of the plaza here. Raven with the reversed boots brought up to flank the caisson, and the caisson unit now unstrapping the bands over the casket. As this unit stands at attention, most of the cars are stopping to the south, to the north of the Capitol steps, and the mourning party is walking toward the steps to be formed general order of entrance into the rotunda. And now we have the arrival of President Nixon's car with the familiar jogging Secret Service man. There's the president has just emerged from the car.